Welcome back to Cheche, the program where opinion counts. Imperial Bank became the second bank in Kenya to attract the attention of the central bank since a new governor took office. And so we have as our guest today, we're discussing the regional and local implications of this move. We have as our guest today Mr. Habalolaka from the Kenya Bankers Association, from the East African Legislative Assembly, Nancy Abisai, and Mike Sebalu, who's a member from Uganda. So, Mr. Olaka, is it fair to say that since we had a new central bank governor, we have a new broom sweeping up the Kenyan banking sector? Would you see it that way?
Well, that could be coincidental actually, but I think the message that comes out of what has happened clearly is the fact that there's some level of maturity that is coming out of the banking sector. Out of the Imperial Bank, one of the things that we learned is the fact that the whole issue was brought up by the board of directors, who realized that there was some inappropriate banking practice that was going on within the institution over which they are overseeing, and they decided out of their own volition to bring it to the attention of the regulator.
You mentioned that previously, and yes. Your point is that this is the first time this is happening.
This is possibly the first time it's happening, and it shows that the board of directors in the banking sector are taking their work seriously, and therefore reviewing the institutions over which they are presiding and bringing to the attention of the regulator when help is required.
We don't know yet what the malpractice at Imperial Bank was, but we do know that the former head of the bank died recently. Is it a coincidence then that we see Imperial Bank falling into all sorts of infamy as a result of that? Is there a link between their troubles now and the death of the CEO? Because he'd been the CEO since inception.
Actually, we do not know yet the actual reason why the decision was taken, and possibly the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation, upon appointment, will be releasing information as they find it necessary to release it to the public. But in my own view, I think the fact that the CEO passed away and this has happened could be purely coincidental.
Should we be talking about term limits for bank CEOs the same way that we do for presidents?
Maybe that's a different topic in terms of the corporate governance of the institutions, but I think each of the institutions will normally have a reasonable period over which a CEO can be able to run the institution and then move on subsequently.
But you work in the policy environment, though, and if you're deferring this question to corporate governance, managing the policy environment, doesn't that mean that we're managing corporate governance? That we're looking at things like term limits for CEOs and how they influence operations of a bank?
I think one of the things that we're already trying to insinuate that it is because of the CEO that this issue has come up, and we're already jumping the gun trying to speculate on the reason why the bank has found itself where it is. I think it could just be a coincidence that the CEO passed away and this issue has come up. But in the event that then the two are linked and it's found to be linked to the fact that the tenure of the CEO was the issue and is found to be systemic in the system, then the issue can be addressed from that point of view. But so far, I think it's more speculative.
Let me go to general bank. The other day I went to my post office and I got a letter from a bank telling me the interest rate which I'm paying my loan has gone up. Interest rates have gone up. It's going to affect everybody, whether you are a manufacturer, whether you are a producer, whether you are at home or a shopkeeper. What are we going to do as Kenyans?
Now, I think we also need to look at it in perspective. The issue of the interest rates in the market has been a concern not only for the banking sector but for the consumer public as well. And we then came up with a framework that tried to address that problem, and that's why we came up with the Kenya Bank's reference rate framework, because the complaint was that when the rates go up in the market, banks unilaterally move their rates up without having a rationale behind it. So we came up with a framework where all banks will price their loans over a common framework, and this common framework, the Kenya Bank reference rate, is determined based on quantities that are observable: the movement in the treasury bill and the movement in the central bank rate. Now, banks therefore are pricing their loans over this Kenya Bank reference rate. And to be fair to the banks, even with the movement in the market, as you have seen over the last few months, we haven't seen the same kind of increase being transferred to the borrowers as would have been otherwise.
But I told you I got a letter
from the Kenya bank.
I got a letter from the bank.
Yes, because the cost of funds in the market has gone up. And so banks have got no alternative but to transmit that.
And what is
borrower.
causing that, government?
What's causing that is the fact that the cost of funds in the market generally is going up. You recall just recently the Treasury bill rate has gone up from what it was 8.5 to right now is in the range of 21-22%.
Exactly.
Now banks have got to pick money from the market at those rates that are applicable in the market. Now when a bank picks deposits that are expensive and they are on lending the same funds to the consumer has got to meet that additional cost. So banks are therefore trying to ensure that you do not overburden the consumer, but on the other hand, you cannot absorb the full shock. Now, banks are working with the consumers in terms of how do they best absorb that shock. And I've seen banks trying to discuss with the consumers. For example, instead of increasing the repayment amount, we can agree you retain the same repayment amount, but the repayment period can be elongated so that the shock on the consumer is not as high, but you'll then have to pay the loan for a bit longer. And there are many mechanisms that banks can negotiate with consumers in terms of how to absorb that kind of a shock.
I don't think many banks are doing that, elongating the period. What they're doing is interest goes up, you pay more. None of them is telling people now, instead of paying 13 months, you pay 48. No.
I've seen quite a bit of communication from the sector, and from where I sit, I'm able to see it quite well. I've seen quite a bit of communication between banks and their customers, where the customers are being told that this is an option you have. Some past customers will prefer to pay the high amount and pay it over a shorter period, which is okay for the consumer. But some customers who have planned their repayment in a way that you have got an expected amount that you're paying out of your salary, for example, when it goes up, it destabilizes your budget. Now, that kind of a customer is the one you need to approach and possibly elongate the period, because then it helps him better. And I think banks, almost all the banks, are getting into that kind of discussion with their customers.
Okay, let's take this regionally, sir, because we know that in terms of integration, we're not presenting our budgets on the same day. Can we assume then that we can see some sort of regional approach to maybe interest rates, to thresholds for capital?
Yeah, the issue of interest rates is a very disturbing scenario across board. Because interest rates essentially is the cost of money, and the cost of money influences the cost of any business. Picked money to go and engage in business or in any productive venture, the cost of money will definitely have a bearing on the cost of doing business. So this one is creating quite a disturbing scenario, both for those that are engaging in business in terms of productive engagement, and even those that benefit from that, because at the end of the day, part of our inflation is also informed by such processes. So there are these issues that are coming up, but there is a lot that our governments are doing together in terms of fiscal and monetary. The Committee of Monetary Affairs, even before our budgets are read, there's a lot of conversation that goes around in terms of ensuring that the disparities are not such that can largely disadvantage the East African people. But most of that will be undertaken when we get the full implementation of the monetary union. Because at that point in time, we will have the structures in place, we will have institutions in place, we will have a convergence of managing those affairs. But at the moment, there is a lot of collaboration in terms of working towards harmonization in that respect.
Ms. Avisa, you're agreeing with that. In terms of the integration then, how would you, because your colleague told us that, and you alluded to this earlier, that it will take us about another 10 years to see the structures in place?
Yes, there's a time frame, there's a framework, yes, that has been put in place. You realize that to achieve this, you need a lot of synergies. You need to look at the physical policies, the monetary policies. You need to look at the harmonization of these policies, bringing a lot of aspects together, because we have not yet achieved political federation. So we have countries which still are sovereign in their own right. So there are certain aspects which countries are still holding on to and want to govern and manage it in the best way they understand. But now when we are moving towards this, it's a process. It's not just a call to suddenly abandon the way things were done and move to a new system. So we need to develop mechanisms, policies and laws. We need frameworks that will now be able to help the process to have a foundation that now can begin to see the proper implementation of those agreed aspects within the protocol.
What does it say about the success then of integration?
Oh, it's great. I don't know whether you've seen, for example, if you have been to any of the borders between the 5 partner states countries, we have what we call the one-stop border posts. You know now that you don't need a passport to travel to some of the countries. You can use a national ID, which is, I think, a very good, it's a key milestone. And if you go to Namanga, you go to Holili and Taveta, you go to Lungalunga and Horohoro, you go to Tukula, you find that there are one-stop border posts. And the East Africa Legislative Assembly already passed a bill on the one-stop border posts, so that if you're on the Kenyan side, for example, you have officers from the Kenyan and Tanzanian side taking care of whatever immigration or transactions or customs aspects that you need to fulfill. And now when you go to the other, so that when you cross over to Tanzania, you don't again have to go to the counter. Before, you have to go to counters on the Kenyan side, cross the border, go to counters on the Tanzanian side. That is time consuming, and it's not even effective. So we will have one stop. Everything is at the same stop. That's a key milestone. Secondly, we have the establishment of the Education Commission, and that is trying to harmonize education, especially at the tertiary level within the different partner states. And we have various laws that the Assembly has passed that I think, if implemented, is going to really fast-track the 4 pillars of integration, which is customs union, common market protocol, monetary union, and then of course the political federation, which will come after we have managed to implement these 3. I think it's also important to say, even as you look within the region, SADC, ECOWAS, CIMAC, and EAC. EAC is actually, even the Pan-African Parliament, EAC is a pace setter. We are the only parliament that have powers to legislate, and what is passed and assented to by presidents become law. So I think East Africa is serious about integration.
People can move, but the vehicles can't move across borders. Anything to do to ease that?
The vehicles can't move across?
Yes, like you can't just drive across into Tanzania and come back. You still have to take out insurance to go to cross the country and things like that. Why? And yet we are moving.
You see, the one-stop border posts have not yet fully, they've not yet been fully implemented, because some of the structures are still being put in place, and the infrastructure, or everything that needs to be done. Once that is completed, it will ease that burden on the travelers and the people crossing borders, because we're also saying that this needs to help in promoting cross-border trade. So it's something that, there'll be free movement of vehicles. I'll tell you, even us as members of parliament, for example, if I have my TCD registration car, for me it is not the Tanzanian side that charges me, it is the Kenyan side that charges me for having that vehicle in Kenya.
Yes.
So after every 3 months, I have to drive to Namanga to renew my license.
Yeah.
And I have to physically go there. But this is from the Kenyan side.
So when is this
from
going
the
to be
Tanzanian
removed?
side.
That's what I'm referring
now,
to.
That's what,
those restrictions.
like I said, it's a process. But now that is what is being worked on right now.
Do you have an idea when the monetary union will come?
Yeah,
Do you have targets?
The protocol has been negotiated and signed. It's been given quite an extended period of implementation, because actually, if you are to look at ceding powers, because when you talk about integration, you are talking about ceding powers to a superior authority. So we are looking at creating an entity. But my considered opinion is that if you successfully manage to cede the power at the level of monetary union. The rest just falls in hand. Because then the central banks will cease to be what they are. You'll then be talking about a central bank of East Africa to manage and to get the entire economy fully integrated. So this is the most intricate stage of integration, and that's why you need to build different structures in terms of records, in terms of statistics. Because like the problem you get in the European Union, their monetary union is suffering because at some point it was based on wrong data. Some countries were giving data for purposes of keeping in there. And you need to get institutional arrangements that ensure that you are operating on the basis of correct data. So this is a stage that is so intricate. This is a stage that will largely influence later on issues of interest rates across the market, because then you are dealing with a monetary arrangement that regulates the market fully. So what we are doing now, we are still operating from our zones of national sovereignty. That's why certain things have to be done as per our individual jurisdictions. But for us to fully integrate and apply the same laws, apply the same principles, this takes time, and it has been given around 10 years to cater for different systemic arrangements in terms of institutional framework, in terms of organs, in terms of operation.
How does politics come in here? Because we know that, for instance, President Museveni is very keen about integration. But when you look at our Tanzanian side, Kenyans feel Tanzania is a hindrance. In fact, there was a time when they used to have a cooperation of the wealthy, minus Tanzania, the others. How does politics come in? We can have a president in Uganda, for instance, who is not like Museveni, or in Tanzania, who is a little bit maybe more progressive.
I think we don't need to take it to individuals. In all our countries, I believe, because all partner states are signatories to the treaty. And once you are a signatory to the treaty as a country, you are committed to the process of integration. You could give it a different level of commitment, but as a country, you are committed to integration. And I don't have any reason to believe that any of our partner states is not committed. They may take a different view in terms of approach, in terms of time, but in terms of ensuring
cooperation of the whaling and
but that is a creation of the media. There was no such a thing. I want it to be clear for our viewers.
Yes.
These three countries, Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya, came together to implement the Northern Corridor.
Yes.
There is the Northern Corridor which affects these countries. That is Mombasa, right up to Kigali. And the three countries have an interest. It would be inconceivable that Tanzania would have an interest in the Northern Corridor. But there is also the Central Corridor, where Tanzania, again, is working with Burundi and other countries to ensure that these operate. So the principle is that we need infrastructure development. But different countries will attach different degree of importance on the relevance. I would be shocked if Kenya is not really interested in the issues of Mombasa port as a gateway to the hinterland. And likewise, I would also be surprised if Tanzania is not interested in the Tanzanian port as another key way to the hinterland. So those are different infrastructural developments attracting different interests on the basis of relevance.
Yeah, but let's look at if you were to take a measure of conviction or support for the cooperation, East African Federation, and there are issues around that, and perhaps what Mutegi is referring to is that there is the support at certain levels is a bit lukewarm in Tanzania towards opening up everything free movement of people, labor, and all that, this is quiet. I mean, we must not paper over that.
No, I don't want to agree with you, my brother, because, like, for instance, we have the Common Market Protocol. Yeah. Countries are implementing that as per the provisions of the protocol. And that is what is applying in all the partner states.
Yeah. We have seen removal of work permits and visas in some countries, and others are still holding on to those. Those are things I'm referring to, because there is still unease about opening the whole door of this cooperation.
I think you need to understand one thing. Yeah. While some countries had identity cards, others did not. They're just trying to put it in place. So when you open it up and a country is not ready, they'll tell you, hey, just wait, let us get our systems right, and then now we can actualize. So there was that misunderstanding, especially in relation to the Republic of Tanzania. And many people thought that maybe Tanzanians are not willing. That is not true. And if we go back to the address by His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete when he was here, actually I think he mentioned it almost 4 times to say that Tanzania is in integration to stay, and they are cooperating, and they have no issue in relation to what was being talked about. And that's why for us, especially in EAC, we say there's no such thing as coalition of the willing. It is not there. There's no such thing as one country doesn't want to.
He was making noise about it himself. Made a lot of noise about that cooperation of willing.
No, it was the creation of the media. He came out very clearly to say that even he was in another meeting with 2 other presidents, and 2 other presidents were not there. How come that was not called, coalition of the willing? So I think people should not read too much into, you can't also have at all times that you must have all the 5 presidents meeting. Sometimes it's not possible. You can have 2, you can have 3, so long as there's a quorum. But sometimes it's not possible that they.
Well, granted, I mean that there is definitely competition. If we are opening up the northern corridor, Mombasa, Kenya, Nairobi, Kampala, to Kigali, obviously Tanzania is going to lose some business to the northern corridor. So it's expected that they would have to compete to get more business Dar es Salaam, and to open that to be the channel for transporting goods up to DRC and Central Africa, I mean the Eastern Congo and so on. So perhaps that's what could have, and it's natural and it's expected, and there's nothing wrong with it to feel like you're losing business.
It is complementary.
The 2 ports are facilities of the region. And the primary consumers and the primary beneficiaries of the are the region. So if we get them efficient operating, especially those of us in the hinterland, Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi, we stand to benefit, because if Mombasa is very efficient in the way it operates, and Dar es Salaam is equally, so in terms of service delivery, we stand to benefit, and that is what the region is all about. But I want you to also appreciate Tanzania is going into elections. But do you know that of the 2 candidates, the East African question is priority on all their agenda? All the 2 candidates are pushing the integration agenda in a manner that shows that there is no likelihood of change of policy towards integration.
Okay, we'll stay with that thought as we take a break now. You're watching Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. We'll see you after these commercials.